are responsible for investigating or completely identifying just really have a reasonable cause to believe a child's been neglected or abused. We'll go over that. And then just really your responsibility as a mandated reporter. So you can go ahead and change the screen. So I wanted you to know at least who was on our team. So we have an intake manager.
Does anybody know where Dan is?
No, I don't know.
And I have 6 supervisors and we run 24/7. So I have a supervisor available from 6 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, it's usually like a midday shift. And we have senior family services specialists, so they can act as a lead in absence of a supervisor, and they have a more experience, oftentimes just a higher education. And we have family services specialists. So I believe there's this entire team is about 55 people. You can go to the next screen. I put on that screen. Oh, you guys got the handout, I believe, and I'm hoping that you can, when you have that, you can read the numbers. I wanted you to have the numbers, the phone numbers, and the work schedules of my supervisors, so you have a means to contact them if you have a question about a report you took or you have any questions. So that's there for you as well. You can go ahead and change it. Our hotline is available 24/7 to take your call. We have 3 people on graveyard. We have people working on the holidays, on nights and weekends. There's the number for you. We do have a separate number for emergencies for law enforcement and medical emergencies. And the reason I want to point that out for you is that sometimes those are emergent situations. And so I have staff that are dedicated to that. So it's not as if I have staff that are dedicated to that emergency line, but I also have but almost the majority of the staff are dedicated to the community line, which is the line that you call. And sometimes there's a wait, but this is a way to kind of manage that workflow and kind of answer calls timely. You can go to the next slide. Go to the next one, Nancy. So what is child abuse and neglect? We are governed under CAPTA, which is the Children and Families Safe Act of 2003. It gives us a minimum standard for defining child abuse, neglect, sex abuse in the states. Whoops. We can go back there a little bit, one more. There we go. Okay. And so in the statutory definition, and we have to comply with the statutory definition because it has to relate to our funding. And this is how they define maltreatment. It's any reason to act or failure to act on the part of a parent or caregiver which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or an act or failure to act which presents imminent risk of serious harm. Just so you understand, in our statutory definition, it refers to a child that is the age of 18. And so we do have children. I don't know your ages if you take, I'm sorry, I don't know that if you serve high school students or not. If Rosemary, if you could nod your head, because I can see you off to the side. Okay. So if you have a student that is 18 years of age and a senior in high school and expected to graduate, we still have authority to provide some protection for that adult, that youth. So just kind of keep that in mind, that even though they are 18, they're still in school, we still have the ability to provide services. Okay, so here's Nevada's definition of child abuse. So it's physical and mental non-accidental injury. It's sexual abuse or sexual exploitation. It's negligent treatment. pardon me, I should have taken a throat lozenge before I started this training. So the bulk of the work that we do is under under neglect, about 70%, and that's like the national average too of the bulk of work that we do in services is providing help to families and children that are experiencing neglect. So, okay, here's some data for just so you kind of have a snapshot of what our community looks like in terms of child maltreatment. So our hotline, we took a little bit over 51,000 calls to our child abuse hotline last year. Not all of those were we able to answer, and not all of those resulted in an investigation. I'll take a minute just real quickly to kind of point out child welfare. It kind of is stepping away from the terms such as investigation of families, and we're using terms like assessments now, because really we want to engage the family to provide services and remedy any situation that they have. And so we kind of stepped away from having that role, like a quasi kind of law enforcement role. Like when I started way back in 88, we actually had shields similar to what a police officer, and we would show those. So we have, in retrospect, when I think about that, and it really wasn't helpful for families if we, in child welfare, taking that kind of authoritative approach. So as a nation, we have pivoted from that and doing assessments instead of investigations. So in this next, Cole, can you go back for just a second? So if you look at how many calls we received, we did about like 12,000 assessments in 2019, and only 21% of them were substantiated, which meant that there was reason to believe that it was true by a preponderance of the evidence. We have about 3,500 kids in our supervision right now, and that could look a lot of ways. And you may be, some of those kids may be enrolled in your school. So we have kids that are placed with parents. We have kids that we place kids with relatives, with fictive kin. And if none of those options are available to us, we place children in family foster homes. I do want to highlight the last number on the bottom, because we're really proud that we were able to find forever homes for 622 kids last year. Sometimes that kind of gets overlooked. That's really the highlight of the work that we do, is when we can if we have to remove a child, and we can place them in an adoptive home or forever family. So we're proud of that. You can go, here's neglect. So the one thing, so neglect is a lack of care that endangers the child's health or welfare. So it looks like things like not being able to provide food, clothing, or shelter, and it's not just poverty related. We don't take cases for poverty, but usually there's an underlying reason for those things, that there isn't clothing or shelter. Oftentimes we have families that are experiencing addiction, mental health issues. So sometimes then those manifest itself into neglect. Here's an interesting data point here. It says, so nationally, that about 30% of the child maltreatment deaths in our country are due to neglect. You can go to the next slide. So Nancy, can you click a little bit? Because for some reason, these bullet points come out. It takes a second for them to pop up. There should be, can you go back? Yeah, so it's those. So I put this kind of in two tables for you to see. So some of the things the physical symptoms that you're going to see around a child that is experiencing neglect, you're going to see, really bad hygiene, inappropriate dress. You don't go out in the home, but sometimes people are in homes. They see not just unsanitary homes, but really unsafe homes. Medical neglect can kind of fall under this category because if they're not meeting, a parent's not meeting their medical needs. Abandon also falls under here. But these are the things that on the right side of your screen, you're going to see some of the behavioral signs that you're going to see of your students. So maybe they have a lot of anxiety. Maybe they're, I know you guys are you all virtual? Rosemary, can you nod your head? Are you all virtual right now? Oh, okay. So you're in the classroom? Okay. So, if you're in the classroom, you see a child that stays at school, doesn't want to go home. Maybe you're going to see a child that's asleep all the time in class. We see that in child, like some of the things we see in child welfare about a child that's falling asleep in class is because the home is so chaotic at night. Maybe there is domestic violence in the home, and so the child doesn't sleep. So they find, the only place that they can sleep is at school. So, okay, can we go to the next? Okay, here's physical abuse. So physical abuse is characterized by physical injury, like a bruise or a fracture. It results from punching, hitting, kicking, biting, burning, or harming a child. Although the injury is not an accident, the parent or caregiver may not have intended to hurt the child. The injury may have resulted from over-discipline or physical punishment that is inappropriate for the child's age or condition.
Okay.
The injury may be the result of a single episode or a repeated episode and can range in severity from minor bruising to death. Can we make sure everybody's on mute?
Oh.
Please?
She won't hang up until what?
So an injury resulting from physical punishment that requires medical treatment is considered outside the realm of normal disciplinary measures.
I'm happy with the whole.
A single bruise may be inflicted inadvertently, however, old bruises,
yeah, it's okay.
combination bruises are.
No, I can look at my schedule real quick.
Hey, Kim Hammond, please mute.
Everybody needs to mute themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to back up for a second. So a single bruise may be inflicted inadvertently. However, an old and a new bruise in combination or bruises on several areas of the face or bruising of an infant will suggest abuse. In addition, any punishment that involves hitting with a closed fist or an instrument, kicking, inflicting burns, or throwing a child is considered child abuse regardless of the severity of the injury sustained. So Nancy, we can go to the next slide. And this is one of those that you have to click to pull up. Yeah, you're going to pull up those bullets. Okay, so, oops. Okay, so on the left, you can see some physical signs of bruises, and you can see sometimes you'll see unexplained burns. You may see an unexplained fracture because we know kids hurt themselves. We know kids play. We know kids fall down. They fall off a bike, and sometimes it's very easy. Yeah, I fell off my bike. I broke my arm, and you can verify that. But sometimes something to think about is if a child says they don't know how it happened or they change their story a couple of times, that's when we really start to wonder what is really going on in the home. This bottom bullet, the likelihood of you having children with head trauma or brain injury, these we see a lot of these in our little kids, like 3 and under. You're going to see some of the things you're going to see in your student is going to be on the right side of this screen. So they're going to be really shy, or they're going to be afraid of adults. They're going to be, like I said before, they're going to be afraid to go home. Sometimes children are going to just report injury by a parent, or they're going to give like some fantastical injury or explanation of how something happened. Sometimes you see with these kids, they may say that they were injured, but they deserved it, because that's just kind of been indoctrinated in their family, so they kind of take on that role. Let's go to the next screen. So emotional abuse. So we define this as a mental injury, and it affects the intellectual or psychological capacity of the child, and it causes substantial impairment of a child's ability to function within their normal range. These are difficult, and these are really hard cases. And one thing I'm going to stress, further down in the PowerPoint, is that you don't have to be 100% sure that a child is being maltreated. You just need to suspect or have a reasonable cause to believe. So if you think a child is being emotionally abused, you just call us and we have that conversation. We're going to do an interview over the phone, and we are going to do an assessment based on the information that you provided, based on information we can contain from previous records, from criminal records. So I want you to leave this training thinking that we are here to help you, and you just bring it to our attention what your concerns are, and we're going to do the rest. We'll decide if we're going to open a case up for emotional abuse, or if we're going to do it for physical abuse. We're going to decide if the allegations are true based on evidence. So let's go to the next slide. And Nancy, this has 3 of those little pop-up bullets. Yep, just 3. Okay. So this one is tricky, and luckily for you, you guys have the experience in dealing with developmental delays and some other disorders that sometimes can look like emotional abuse, but is actually just an underlying mental health condition. So you guys kind of are ahead of the game when it comes to emotional abuse. So you might see developmental delays related to emotional abuse, or with your expertise may understand that the developmental delay is a result of an impairment. They could have speech disorders. We have failure to thrive here, but that really could just also mean poor, like bad nutrition. We need to go back, Nancy, a second, about sex abuse.
Sorry, I'm admitting people at the same time I'm trying to do this.
You're multitasking. So
I'm the only one who can admit people.
Oh, okay. So here's some things that you're going to see on the right side of a child that it could potentially be emotionally abused. You might see sleep disorders. You might see conduct or behavior disorders. You might see a child that's kind of parentified and taking care of your other students, because that could be because they're used to taking care of their siblings at home because of the circumstances of the home. You might see really childish kind of or infantile kind of kids. Let's go to the next screen. So we also investigate sexual abuse. The one thing I want to point out here is we have a unit that is dedicated to the investigation of sex abuse, and that's all that they do. So they're trained in forensic interviewing. They are trained to work with law enforcement because sometimes these have some criminal aspects to it. So they have a special expertise in sexual abuse. Sorry, something is beeping in here. We do sexual abuse, which are like physical acts, but we also do some sexual exploitation where they're forced to engage, they're forced or encouraged to engage in prostitution or pornography. We also just entered the field of child trafficking. So we have a unit that is specifically dedicated to victims of sex trafficking. So that's something new for us. It started from the last legislative session. So we do have a unit there, and it's called an at-risk unit. So here is indicators of sex abuse. Nancy, I'm going to tell you how many. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullets here. Pregnancy is the last one. There you go. So, so you might see the physical signs of sexual abuse. You actually might see, probably maybe not bullet number 1. I think only in the extreme cases would you, as an educator, see that. But you might see a child that has difficulty walking or sitting. Just the bullets that you see down, the last 2 bullets here. If we have a student, if there's a student or a child that has an STD and does not disclose kind of where they got that from, or identify that it's a boyfriend, an age-appropriate boyfriend, something like that, we will investigate that to rule out that a child wasn't abused in the home. And the same thing with pregnancy. If you have a youth that is pregnant, doesn't identify the dad, we're concerned that it might be someone in the household, we'll investigate that. So on the right side of your screen, you might see some behavioral indicators of somebody being essentially being sexually abused. So the one thing that I want to point out as we get lower, like is specifically down here around delinquency and running away. I mentioned just a second ago about our at-risk youth unit, and we see kids that are delinquent, the kids that are running away, they don't want to be at home. And once they find a safe place to be, and they'll make a disclosure, and it may even take a while. It may take 6 months, it may take a year, but once they feel a little bit more comfortable and settled and safe, that they'll disclose that they've been victimized. Let's go to the next slide. I'm gonna look at the chat real quick and see if there's any, okay, there's no, oh, I wanna make sure there weren't any questions I need to answer. So we're gonna transition to the mandated reporter section. And so I wanted to take this minute. If anybody has a question, they can unmute themselves and ask, or they can put it in the chat.
I have a question, if that's okay. We had a situation where we had a student we were concerned about, and what we're finding is we're having a hard time gathering information. And so I was just going to ask for some suggestions potentially. Obviously, the parents are in the background. Like when we're trying to talk to these kids to gather information, it's tricky. We're not able to get as much information per se. And so if we have like this kind of gut feeling about it, I feel like sometimes that's all we have to go on right now. And so I guess my question to you is, how are you guys handling that when we're not able to gather information? Because I feel like sometimes it might just get pushed off because there's not as much information. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I always encourage you to make a report because we may have history on the family, open or closed. We may have an open case on someone, and you're not going to know that. But if you're calling and saying, I have a concern about this, this is what I'm seeing, and it's open, we'll send it to the person who the caseworker assigned, and they can explore that more. Perhaps we could go look and say, oh, well, we just closed it this last month and we didn't have enough evidence, but this new incident kind of supports us moving forward. So I encourage you to call. We also have access to local criminal history. So that's something that we could consider. So if you're suspecting physical abuse or you're suspecting domestic violence, and we can kind of crosswalk that to criminal history, that gives us, it gives more weight, and in our evaluation. I think something popped up in the chat. So the question is, so I'd like clarification on corporal punishment. The use of an item is a strap, a belt, etc., considered child abuse. I feel like this is a gray area. Yeah, you're right to feel that way. It can be. If someone is using enough force to cause an injury or multiple injuries or medical treatment, like I said before, that's something that we need to look at, because someone was out of control and caused trauma to the body. I want to point out, not every time someone calls and makes a report saying a child was hit by a belt do we investigate. We don't. As you can see in that number that we talked about earlier, the number of calls versus the number of assessments that we actually assign is significantly different. If you have a question about is this abuse or neglected, call us and we will talk about that together. We will use the prior history that we have in help guiding our decision making. So perhaps this is, the child says he was hit with a belt and's got a bruise on the lower arm. Well, let's talk about that. Let's see, is this happen all the time? Was this a one-side incident? We're going to go back and look at our history and see if we've been involved with the family before. We're going to look at the dynamics in the household. So perhaps there's a new person in the home, or maybe somebody is absent from the home and causing more stress on the home. We're going to look at all of those factors before we decide we're going to open up a case for assessment. I'm hoping that answers your question somewhat. Okay, so let's go on to...
Sorry, can I ask one more question?
Mm-hmm.
So we have an interesting case right now. We have a student who grandma was the guardian, the only guardian. Grandma recently passed away. Mom is in the home, but does not have guardianship rights. So just been wondering, and this just happened this past weekend. So we didn't know if that's a CPS call, just because currently, like, there's nothing listed as guardianship. Is that something that we would report, or does mom automatically get guardianship rights back when something like that happens?
I'm going to kind of answer because it's kind of a legal question. I don't really have the authority to ask whether guardianship gets converted to because the grandmother passed, whether it gets converted back to the mom. I don't have the answer for that. But what I would suggest is, it's always a concern when there is someone else caring for a child. It's like, why does grandma have guardianship and not the mom? Was that something that my department did? Was it something that the family did privately? Like, there could be all kinds of legitimate circumstances and why they did a guardianship. Maybe mom has maybe mom had medical issues a year or two ago, so they did this, but maybe those issues are not present now. The flip side of that would be we took custody of a child and we placed with grandma, we let her get guardianship. So it's probably worth a call to our hotline to find that out. Or you can also, I'm going to give you a link to a website where you can make that report as well.
Okay, thank you.
Kara, also, yes. I think your registrar should notify Michael or Colin, because you have to have guardianship papers at your school for certain events at school, whether it's an IEP or a 504, but the grandparent has guardianship for some reason. So you might ask Colin and Michael also what would be the next step.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. And just to point out, it's not a child welfare issue if there's if the legality of who has the child is uncertain, because families care for family. So we only intervene when there is no one. to care for a child, or the people that are caring for the child can't do it. So, okay. All right, let's go over to the mandated reporter section. So we can click one over, and if you click too far, that's okay. So this is just the statute. It's 432B.220 that identifies who needs to make a report for child abuse. And it is, if you want to go flip to the next screen, that would be great too. But really, and to sum it up, anybody that is required to make a report, that statute goes into detail of, it's very detailed in regard to it's teachers, it's school personnel, it's doctors, it's attorneys, it's sometimes clergy. I mean, it really drills down to people that, anybody that in their profession that works with children. So you qualify in your role as an educator, as a mandated reporter. The highlights that I want to make in relation to this slide is that if you see on number 1, it's underlined that it says that you just have a reasonable cause to believe that the child has been abused or neglected. It's a very low standard. So if you just suspect child abuse or neglect, you can make a call. Let's see, and if you look under B, is that the statute just requires that you make the report no later than 24 hours after this information is known to you. So those are really the two highlights for you guys to keep in mind when you make a report. I always like to take a moment here to talk about giving your name to our agency. Yes, you can be anonymous, but what I'll tell you is if there's ever a question, if you fulfilled your responsibility as a mandated reporter, if you do not leave your name, there is no way for our agency to verify that on your behalf. So it's a decision that individuals will have to make. Whether they leave their name or not. I will tell you that we are not allowed to give that information out to anyone, even in the court. We can't say that, we can't give that information in a courtroom, so it is protected. It doesn't mean they can't figure it out based on the information that you have, or tell you, oh, CPS told me that it was you. We don't do that. Sometimes parents will say that to just try and get the person to admit it because they suspect that they made the report, but we will never give your name out. So leave your, we ask that you leave your name and your phone number. We'll probably call you and ask you if there's anything, if there's anything that you've just learned after you made the call or something that you forgot. So we'll leave your name, please. I think a chat, somebody popped something up in the chat. The question is, if you not give your name, but you have a case number, wouldn't that be proof you made the report if proof was needed? Not necessarily, because the case number, you could get that case number. It doesn't, all that is verification that you know the case number. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go on. Let's go on to making a report. So let's go, let me minimize this chat. So here is our number to the hotline. And also below is the number to our website if you want to make a report online. I know our phone lines are very busy, and they are busier during school hours, because the bulk of our reports come from teachers. So I understand how busy you are, and so we have that we have that service for you to make a report online, but we would prefer you to sorry, my phone is ringing in my ear. Sorry, let me turn it off. To make to call us, because like I said, this is a conversation that we are going to have about what you know about the family. And so it's just more robust when there can be a dialogue back and forth. But if you need to make a report online, you can absolutely do that, but be as detailed as possible, because sometimes with limited information, it's really hard to proceed. Because we've seen things like someone say, Johnny came in with a black eye. That could mean all kinds of things, right? It could mean all kinds of things. Kids hurt themselves all the time. So we're really looking for that correlation between, Johnny has a black eye because A, B, or C. So, because we're trying to connect it to abuse or neglect. So let's go to the next slide, please.
Okay, you didn't want me to click on the link.
No, they can have the link. No, don't. You don't need to click on it.
Okay.
No. You just it'll connect you to the county website. You click on you want to submit a report. It gives you some direction on letting you know that we don't check that box immediately. We have up to 24 hours to check it. So if it's an emergency, you need to make a call, and then you fill out a form. It's like a PDF you just fill out. I kind of already talked about you being anonymous, but if you could leave your name so we can verify you're a mandated reporter. I said that you would be maybe called for additional information. And the one thing to point out here is that you have immunity from civil or criminal liability if the report is made in good faith. There is the expectation that the report is made in good faith. And I put this last bullet here specifically for the Clark County School District, is that they had a policy or a practice within schools that a teacher could not make a report. And maybe it wasn't all schools, it was some. A teacher could make a report, it was the principal that made it. So I just like to point out that you as a mandated reporter, if you have information, then you are the one that needs to make that report. And even if you think about it, if you tell someone else about an incident, there's a loss of the facts when you tell someone else and then they tell us. So it's always best to come from the person that has the most information. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we point back out here about calling the hotline within 24 hours of you being known of a child being victimized. The one thing in bullet 2 I wanted to point out is that we have jurisdiction over issues within a family. So we don't have, so if it's a mom who's drug addicted and that's affecting her children, or it's a dad who physically abuses his children, it is not the neighbor, it is not the daycare center. It's if you just kind of think about it, within a household. And I give this example. Rosemary is probably tired of hearing this example, but so here's like a scenario to kind of help you decipher some of this. And again, what I stress with you is if you don't know the circumstances, just call us and we will figure it out. It's not your responsibility to figure out who to call. If you call us and it should go to law enforcement, we'll forward it to law enforcement. So don't really worry about that. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of education. So here's kind of a scenario of when we would be involved. So let's say we have a household and it's a mom and a dad and 2 kids and an uncle. Uncle is, he lives in the house, he cares for the kids when the parents are at work, and the uncle abuses one of the children. So we have the authority to investigate that matter. but let's take the uncle out of the home, and let's say he lives, let's say kids, family lives in Summerlin, uncle lives in Henderson. Not that jurisdiction matters, but the kids go over there, they spend the night with their cousins, and the uncle abuses the child in that home. We don't have the authority to do that because he's not the parent or the guardian and residing in the home. The last bullet here is about the authority that Department of Family Services has to investigate a child that is victimized by a school personnel. So I just wanted to point that out. Let's go. Okay, so here is when to call law enforcement. So I gave the example of the uncle that doesn't live in the home, and other examples of something happens at a daycare or something happens, with a sports coach. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in here and just answer these questions about educational neglect, because I know that's on everybody's radar, given the connectivities issues everyone is having, and students being in virtual settings, and how to get work done. So what we have a specific protocol and an agreement with the school district, and it's actually a checklist that we ask them to complete that outlines what's expected of the school and to remedy the educational neglect, and listing absences and things like that. So it's a pretty formal protocol, and I am more than happy to share that. I can send that to Rosemary, and so you can use that. I don't know if you have a specific policy around when you report educational neglect or not, but we use the definitions that are in statute under the school districts. For example, on elementary students, it's 20 unexcused absences. For secondary students, it is 10 absences in a semester. So we use that standard. And then there's also requirements from the school to kind of contact the parent, try and resolve the situation, have a meeting with them, trying to understand why the child is not attending school and things like that. So I'm more than happy to share that document. And if you guys want to build your program around reporting through that, like our educational neglect referrals come from the school district's educational neglect department. They put a packet together outlining all the absences. That it helps us again, because we're a civil court. So if for some reason we ever had to go to court, we need that documentation. So it's best to have that up front. So I will make myself a note to send that to Rosemary. And the Department of Juvenile Justice has a new program called, it's TPOP for short, but it's called Truancy Prevention and Outreach. Rosemary, I'm also going to give you their flyer in an email so you can see all the services that they offer. The school district currently, they're working specifically with 26 schools in the school district, and they're getting referrals on many other schools as well. I think they've had like 1,500 referrals so far this year. They provide some case management services for families that are just experiencing all sorts of, a lot of issues. I mean, this is a really trying time for us. So they'll if it's poverty related, if it's housing related, if it's food related, they'll do some outreach and try and help support families. Because some, kids don't go to school when they can't eat, and or parents they don't make sure that they're logging into class when they're just trying to make sure they're not going to get evicted. So, okay, Nancy pushed me to the next slide, so let's just jump ahead. So, what information is needed? So we really want to know who's involved, what happened, kind of when the incident happened. We need to know where the families live. If you don't know it, more than likely we could obtain it, but it's easier if you know it. And really the bottom line, the bottom bullet here is something we really want to know is what is this kiddo like? How do they function on a daily basis? You know them well. Do they have special education needs? Do they have medical issues? There could be all sorts of things. Are they functioning at their age level? And this is important because, again, we're doing an assessment of a child and of a family. And some of those things that we talk about could make a child more vulnerable or not, depending on the situation. So you may have a special needs medically fragile child who not only is not only vulnerable because of their medical condition, but also they're challenging because it's stressful to care for a high needs medically fragile child. So it helps us understand what could the potential stress level be in the home. Again, you may have a kid with extreme behavioral problems, and so he's more vulnerable because he can be more provocative to his caregiver. So those are some of the things that we want to understand and help us make a decision around how we're going to intervene. So let's go on. I see a chat real quick. Let me see. So let me back up for a question. It says, is it the responsibility of a school psychologist or a school administrator register to report educational neglect? That was the question. For the school district, it goes through them. I don't know what your protocol is. Is the Clark County School District, educational neglect comes through their educational neglect department. They have a formal protocol. They have someone that reviews records, make sure they meet the standard of educational neglect before it's forwarded to us.
We don't have anything like that, Debbie, but if you send the material to Rosemary, we can definitely look into it for the schools and the lawyers. We have a couple lawyers, they would look into it, and if they thought it was a good idea from Academica, write a policy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're more than happy. We're happy to work with you on that. What I don't want, I want you to, I'm going to send that to you so you understand what our standard is, because I don't want you calling if a child has just been absent 3 days, right? And then you're on hold for 20 minutes, for an hour. So I think if we could work together on that, it'd be good for everyone. So let's pop again forward to the next slide. Let's see. So here's some other things that we're gonna look for and ask about and understand that you may not know. So if this is a new student, you may not know history about a family, or perhaps you had the student sibling the year before, and there was physical abuse with that other student. So that's the kinds of things the information we're trying to gather. When we're looking at this second bullet here about severity, remember when we talked a little bit ago about physical abuse and what's physical abuse? The severity plays a key part in this. Again, I had said, there are times that a child is hit with the belt and we do not investigate. So because perhaps this was an isolated incident, perhaps this was on a low risk area. So we take all of those things into consideration. So it's helpful to know if, in terms of severity, if you know it, if the child disclosed that, yes, I get hit every Friday, I get hit, this is the first time this has ever happened. Sometimes kids will even say, my mom was really upset and she apologized to me because she was so upset that this happened. So we're going to look at all of that. And again, that and how often a child has been exposed to the situation. So let's go to the next screen. So I'm going to just give you an overview of the process of what happens once you make the call. So you make your call. You have your you do your assessment with the intake worker. They review. They write up a report. They gather additional information. based on the databases that we have. They determined if we're going to assign it, how fast in which we're going to respond. And then that is forwarded to a supervisor to review. So every report that is taken is reviewed by a second person, whether that is a supervisor or whether that is one of my senior staff. If we assign a report, it's sent to our NIA unit, which is we are getting away from Child Protective Services. It's Nevada Initial Assessment Unit, or we send it to differential response. And I think there's a slide about differential response in a minute, which we'll go through. And then, like I said before, you may receive a call from us if we just want to clarify what's in the report, touch base with you to see how the child is doing since you made the call, things like that. So let's go to the next slide. So here I had talked about there being a second person looking at the report. These are the terms that we use for this. So the initial screening is what's done by my intake worker. The second set of eyes is a secondary screening, and that's when they review the report, they approve the report, they make any changes, and they assign a response time. And I'm going to go over that in just a second. And so let's scoot over to the next slide. I don't want to kind of burden you with definitions, but these are that we use as say, a child is safe or a child is unsafe. So perhaps when you talk to somebody from our department, you're going to hear that language. So I just kind of put that in here for you to see. I talked a little bit about children's vulnerability. That's something we look at when deciding whether to investigate. How vulnerable is a child? Like I'll give an example. So let's say you have when you're looking at vulnerability, let's say you have a 16-year-old that is 6'2", 220 pounds, said he got hit by a belt by his mom, and his mom is 5'1" and 100 pounds. Like, we're going to look, that 16-year-old is not as vulnerable as perhaps a 5-year-old who is medically fragile or has behavioral needs. So we look at vulnerability. We also look at the protective capacity of the parent. Like, how do they understand about caring for their children? Are they invested in their children, and invested in parenting, want to be a parent? Do they recognize stresses or threats in their environment? So we look at the parent's level of functioning when we do our assessment as well. So I'm going to have Nancy flip the PowerPoint. Okay, so I talked briefly just a slide or two ago about response times. And what that means is we make a decision in how soon we're going to respond to a report that we screen in for assessment. So we have present danger cases where we've identified there's an immediate, significant, and observable family condition that's actively occurring, and which means we need to be out and make face-to-face contact with the child and the children in that home within 6 hours. So there is a percentage of our reports that fall into that category. It's not the other majority of the reports fall into the categories we're going to talk about in a second. Like, for example, here's an example of a present danger case. So I'll give an example of like something in the home, like, SWAT is at the home and asking for our assistance. We have a child presenting at the hospital with head trauma or with a skull fracture or internal injuries. Those are priority 1 reports. You may see in a school setting a child that has injury, multiple planes of the body, multiple stages of healing, is afraid to go home, said they're going to be abused when they get home. Those are something that would be a decision that we would consider for making a 6-hour response. Let me see what the chat was. So, let me get to those in a second. Let me finish the response times, and then I'll answer the things in the chat. So let's go into the second slide. So impending danger means that there's a situation that's out of control in the home, and it's severe, it's observable, it's imminent, and again, that vulnerable child standard. So we go out and meet the child and the children in that home and the family within 24 hours. So the next slide is there are no safety threats identified, and we're going to go out within 72 hours. So an example of maltreatment would be educational neglect. We would respond within 72 hours and make contact with the child. Sometimes, let me see another example of 72-hour response is, you may see this situation where you have a child that it lives in 2 different households, and so he was victimized by mom on Monday, and here it is Tuesday, and he's not scheduled to go back to mom until next Monday. We'll make a set. We know that for 72 hours there's a degree of certainty that he's going to be safe, or there's not reason to believe that he's unsafe. So we would go out in 72 hours under those in that example. I'm going to ready for the next slide. Okay, so I don't know how familiar your organization is with differential response. The school district has a relationship with differential response. They are our family resource center providers, and there are 3 in our community. There is Olive Crest provides services to families for the north side of town. East Valley Services provides services, case management services, food services for the east and central part of town. And then we have Boys and Girls Club that does the west side of town. So they will work with the family on a lot of the work they do is around educational neglect. There's not a safety concern for a family, but there are barriers to getting into school. The barriers with the parent understand the importance of education. So they do a lot of work around educational neglect. They will do some environmental neglect type of cases or inadequate food, because they have a lot of resources. They have food pantries, etc., food vouchers to get families help. They go out within 3 working days. And so those family resource centers are funded through government assistance, government funding, and we have a contract with those agencies to provide services to our families. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here's some tips if a report is not assigned. We should be able to tell you why that it doesn't meet our department's intervention. We should be able to articulate that for you. And if you are dissatisfied with that decision, I'd like you to contact a supervisor. That's why at the beginning of your materials in this presentation, I gave you contact information for our supervisors so you can reach out to them. So please do, if you have a question, you can talk to one of our supervisors. And then let's go to the next slide. So let me take this second right here and get to those questions that are in the text. Let me see, where did we end? So when an investigator is interviewing children to explore possible abuse, can the parent be present during the interview? We prefer that not to happen because it could affect the depth of the disclosure. It's uncomfortable for a victim to talk about being abused when the person that harmed them is in the room. We ask for permission for them to be interviewed, but they're not they're not present. The flip side of that, there could be a time where there is someone present to be of support to a child. But the perpetrator, for lack of a better word, I'm sorry I use that word, it's kind of offensive word, is not present. So when a report is made of any type to CPS, does CPS follow up with all parents, especially if it's a split household? Yes, we will, because our kids can live in different households, and so we will do an assessment on the home where the incident occurred, but we will also talk to the other parent as to provide information on a lot of things. We talked earlier about the child's functioning and how vulnerable they are. That parent is the expert at that and can give us information, can talk about what they know about the other parent's level of functioning in their parenting. So yes, we do. Yes, we do contact the non-offending parent. If a teacher realizes that a student is home alone during virtual instruction, what's the age requirement for reporting? Actually, the statute is vague, or is actually silent on that issue, and I actually prefer it that way, because if there was an age requirement, it would cause some kids to not be, for us to intervene, not to intervene on some kids and intervene on others when perhaps we don't need to. So those are conversations that we should have over the phone, because again, we're talking about vulnerability of a child. You may have a very mature 10, 12-year-old that can be home alone. But you could also have a 16-year-old that shouldn't be home alone because of their vulnerability. So those are conversations that we should have over the phone. Okay, I think I got everything on the chat, I think. And that ends my my PowerPoint presentation. So
I wanted to, in my question, last year we had a case here in the school that we made a report. And then when the caseworker came, she interviewed the kids with the mom present.
okay.
But she didn't talk to any of the staff in school when she did that. So that's why I made that question and getting clarification how that works.
Okay, so I mean, it's really hard. So it's really hard to pull out one specific incident and say this is what we do on everything, because every case is sort of unique. There could be some extenuating circumstances as to why we did it that way. It could be to do with the child being feeling unsafe, being around strangers. I mean, we meet a child and they're scared. I've had to pull kids out of class and ask them really personal questions, and very intimate questions, and they're afraid. So sometimes the very first interview, like that may be one interview of several. So it could be that interview was just about rapport building. It could be that the child was too afraid to speak without the presence, because they're just not going to say anything, and perhaps that the formal interview happened at a different situation. So we try and interview the children independently to get the most objective interview that we can.
On that case, though, the mom knew before that they were coming to interview the kids. She actually came before and pulled their kids out and prepped them, like knew, and then they all met together. And that's where we were a little confused about, because it was a report from the school, and then the next day she pulled them out to prep them.
Making is not solely on that one interview of the child. It could be interviews with other children, with relatives, could be with school, it could be with anyone that has knowledge about the family. So our sole decision making isn't on the one interview. for some reason, I can only see myself. And I'm not a fan of that. Let me see if I can fix that. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I can see everybody's faces. So, okay, what other questions do you have? None? Okay. I think you had you had something before me as well, so it sounds like you've had a pretty busy morning. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me and get a better understanding about child welfare here in Clark County. If I could just leave you with a thought that you don't have to have concrete evidence that a child is being abused in order to make a report to us, to just call us and we will take the lead and we make that decision. It's not yours. So don't feel like you're personally responsible for doing that. We provide services to families. Some people think that in child welfare that we remove children, place children in foster care. That number of children going into foster care in Clark County is very low. Children have to be unsafe, and in order to be removed, we have to meet a standard, and it has to go in front of a judge in order to make that decision. We do have a very high record of placing children with relatives. So I don't want you to worry that if you make a call, a kid is going to go into foster care and will spend the rest of their lives there. There are extreme cases that are in the media, but we try and find permanency for a family within, actually the federal requirement is 2 years for find permanency for a child if we have to take them into custody, and it looks all different kinds of ways. It could be back at home, like families got services, they've resolved whatever their issue. Mom has got a better understanding of her addiction and is getting treatment, or her family understands the mental health issues and how it affects parenting, and the family has come in and supported the child and the parent so the child could remain there. We place with relatives. It sounds like you've seen, we just talked about guardianship. We place children with relatives or fictive kin. And we even have, in extreme cases, when there's no alternative, we place children in adoptive homes and they're adopted. So it looks all different. It looks all different kinds of ways. So, okay. I will depart if that's everything. I owe Rosemary our checklist, so you know what that looks like. And I will also give you the brochure for the truancy prevention and outreach program that is offered through juvenile justice. I think there's some contact information on that brochure, so if you want to get connected and make referrals to them, it should be on there. But if Rosemary, if it's not, you ask me and I'll give it to you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Everybody really appreciated this. I think it was very valuable information.
Sure. I mean, we're all together here protecting our kids in the community. So I appreciate and applaud your efforts. I don't know that if I was an educator that I could do what you do in this new environment. So I applaud you for that. So thank you.
Thank you for being with us and supporting us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye.
Good to see you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, I just had one more question that wasn't answered.
Okay.
And just out of curiosity, I was wondering if I, as a psychologist, mandatory reporter, if I do report a case that turns out to be not abuse, or can I get in trouble for actually reporting not significant case?
No, thank you. But that you will not, you are making a report in good faith. And it is our responsibility to look at the case and do an assessment and determination to determine if it's true or not. You are absolved of that responsibility.
Oh,
Debbie,
okay.
you can almost say conversely, if you do not do it, that's when it becomes problematic.
Yes.
I just wonder, in a case when the actual abuser or prospective abuser is threatening that, you know, they will sue us or something like that. So I'm just kind of curious if that's the case at all. That's
Yeah, you can, I mean, people can say that they're going to sue you, but again, the standard with the statute for mandated reporters is that you made it in good faith. They would have to prove that you didn't make it in good faith, and they would also have to have your identity, which is protected by law.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing? Document, document, document. You have case notes, document what you've done. That way, if someone were to come back, you have information to protect you. Again, it's a reasonable person standard. So. I saw another question there, Debbie. It was.
Where's my chat? I can't, can you read it to me? For some reason, I can't see the chat.
It went,
Sure. It's clarity on educational neglect if outside of the district. I'm assuming outside of the district, I think they're referring to us, not being CCSD.
Oh, okay. So what would be the standard? So we are going to use the standard that the Clark County School District uses. That is a standard that we are going to use. So that's in the school district regulations. Again, it is 20 absences for elementary students, and it's 10 they're all unexcused. So it's 20 unexcused for younger children and 10 unexcused for secondary students. So when I send you the checklist, it outlines the statute on there. So that's what the standard we use. And just to take this one step further, we look at it from a child welfare perspective, is what caused the educational neglect? Was it the faults and the habits of the parents? Or is it a issue with technology? Like we wouldn't take a report if the child was absent 10 times because it was an issue with technology that was beyond the parents' control. So we look at all of those things.
So I think one thing, Debbie, that has happened over the past few years is the new law was passed on chronic absenteeism. And the school's responsible for making sure that kids are attending. Chronic absenteeism has been defined. The only way students aren't considered chronically absent is if the school investigates and it's a health issue and we provide homebound. Then homebound is a service, they're considered in school. So the only other option is educational neglect. And it's not the 20 days. The law is 10% of the number of days enrolled. So if you're enrolled for 20 days, 2 days, they're chronically absent. So I think people are trying to figure out, are they absent due to a health issue or just because the parent is not showing up?
Yeah, I was going to try it since we have a second. I was going to, let me see if I can pull the checklist out. So, and I can show it real quick on my screen. So let me see if I can figure out how to share it. Let me put it over here. So I don't want to prevent you from making a report, but I'll let you know that because we had our legal team look at the laws, and this is the instruction and the guidelines that we are given. Let me see if I can share this. Okay, can you see a document that says Clark County Department of Family Services Educational Neglect Screen-In Checklist? Can you see that? Yeah?
No.
No?
I can't.
Oh, I wonder if it's because I have, let's see. Let me try it now, because I have a couple of monitors.
There you go.
Okay. So, So this was reviewed by we have a legal department and our district attorney, and this is the approved standard that we use. So this is what I'm going to be sharing. So it has child has unapproved absence of 20 days or more elementary, 10 or more in any course during a semester. And then it talks about the intervention that is required by statute from the school. And then we talk down here about parental fault and what led up to the child not being in school. Again, like this would be like if there's connectivity issues or technology issues, it wouldn't be the parental fault and we would not assign it. So any educational neglect referral that comes to us will